The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
For most of its history, San Mateo County has been a quiet, suburban place. But now with a changing economy and changing demographics, the question is, what should the identity of San Mateo County be? We're going to discuss this and more next on The Game. Welcome to The Game. I'm Mark Simon. San Mateo County has for many, many years been passed through and passed over. It was the suburban community, first to the major job centers in San Francisco, and then subsequently San Francisco and the growth of Silicon Valley. So now San Mateo County has its own economic base. The largest biotech center in the world in South San Francisco, a booming company in Facebook in Menlo Park. It's changing economically, it's changing demographically, it's changing into more of an urban environment as traffic grows, as more and more construction takes place. We're going to talk about this changing San Mateo County and whether or not the county needs to assert itself with a new identity so it can play more of a role in the region. It's been one of the benefits that it hasn't had to do that in the past. But we're joined by Bob Marks, who has been a long-time participant and observer and advisor to people in San Mateo County politics, and Melissa Michelson, political scientist from Menlo College, who knows a thing or two about how political influence and organization works. Bob, let's start with the premise of the question. Do you think it's valid that San Mateo County needs to change its identity? It needs to assert itself in a way it never has before.
Yeah, I think it needs to assert itself in a way that it never has before. And I think part of it is we've always been between, as you said, between San Francisco and San Jose. You've got all these cities, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County for the most part, that do have that common feeling. And I think joining to them and creating policy, thinking about that larger group of cities that exists in Santa Clara County would be a good first step.
Well, Melissa, we have in San Mateo County, you have 20 cities. None of them is huge. None of them dominates the landscape. And as Bob observed, basically up until about Santa Clara, you have a series of cities that are pretty much the same as the San Mateo County cities. There are cohesiveness of interests, although there's some pockets of places where that's not the case. Atherton and Los Altos Hills probably don't have that much in common with San Bruno and South San Francisco. But as a political scientist, is there an opportunity there for cohesion? And what's the way that something like that happens in politics?
Well, you have to have concerted efforts by leaders of the various cities, or maybe the mayors would come together and decide, here's something we want to do collectively. But I think there's actually a lot of diversity within San Mateo County, and you already alluded to some of it. And even within each city, of course, there are these divisions between people who want to slow growth and not have so much traffic and new construction, and people are like, no, we need, better roads, and we need more infrastructure, and we need more low-income housing. And so I think it's very difficult for the county to come together when even within each city, I think we're seeing a lot of battles in terms of where is the city of San Mateo going? Where is the city of South San Francisco going? And until the cities know as individual entities where they're going, it's hard to say, okay, now as a county, here's how we say we're not just this blank space in people's minds between San Francisco and San Jose.
Yeah. Bob, you've worked at that level in politics in San Mateo County for a long time. What are the barriers to these cities acting in a concerted way on certain issues?
They are so many. A lot of them are historical barriers that don't change. Cities, even though the people change, the leadership people change, the character of the city, the way they approach issues doesn't seem to change. And so it's tough. It's tough to get everybody going in one direction. So I think it comes back to leadership. I always believe that if somebody comes up with a concept, an idea, a vision, and they can go out and articulate it, that people will follow that.
Can you give us some examples from political science of an issue that creates this sort of opportunity Is it a social change? Is it an economic dislocation or disruption? I mean, we're seeing in San Mateo County a substantial change in the financial sort of infrastructure of this county. Is that something that can build change? It's not happening in every city. So the question is, how do you make it happen across city lines?
Yeah, there has to be something that really is bringing people together, either some sort of crisis like an environmental problem, or maybe it's traffic or public transportation, something that the whole county agrees, like that there are pockets across that join people together and they say, okay, we've got to work together to solve this public transportation problem or to take care of this infrastructure problem or something like that. I don't know that there's anything there. There's just kind of this widespread feeling like, why aren't we getting more attention from the federal government, from the state government? Everyone knows about San Francisco, everyone knows about San Jose, but it's like, we're not even here. We're just this blank space. Mm-hmm. And this like this identity crisis for the county, and they don't have something to come around, right? There's Facebook, but that's not an identity to say, oh, we're the home of this famous company. I don't see that the county feels that it has an identity.
Mm-hmm. In many ways, San Mateo County is all of California in one county. I think it's important also to look at the diversity, the dramatic change that's taken place here. We tend to go back in history and tend not to think about how this county has changed, and that the people that we're dealing with in a lot of these cities are very different people with very different values and very different ideas that when we grew up and the people here. So that plays into it too. It's takes somebody to tap into that. And it's not clear to me, what that rallying point is for people in this county. Certainly, I mean, you and I think in terms of transportation, and I think that can be. Housing is another issue. But what is the rallying point in this county that's going to get people to join together and try to get something done?
I think one of the challenges is that most of the political rallying points are opposition to things. You referenced that really, didn't you? In that people see what happened in Redwood City, mm-hmm. and a lot of urban planners think it was brilliant. High density, high rise, near transportation, near a vibrant downtown that's become more vibrant because of that development. But then there are neighboring cities that say, oh, we're not going to be Redwood City. They see that as a very negative thing. And on that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stick with us. Don't go away.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Over here we have Bob Marks and Melissa Michelson. Bob is a longtime political observer and insider in San Mateo County. Melissa is a political science professor at Menlo College. And they're kind enough to have plunged into a new topic for me about San Mateo County and what is it and what should it be. Let's talk a little bit about what it is, first of all, because the image of the place, I wrote once years ago in a column for the Chronicle, is a hotbed of social rest. It is seen as a quiet place that you get through to go someplace else, to Silicon Valley or to San Francisco or wherever. It's not that anymore, and it wasn't that long ago I did a series of interviews with members of city councils in this county of Asian descent. I was astonished to hear that 67% of the people in Millbrae are Chinese or Chinese American. Just Chinese or Chinese, not counting Asian. Do you think people understand how different the county is than it was just 10 or 15 years ago, and how diverse it is? And do they think of diversity as a strength or as a detriment?
Well, you can't say that the people think one thing. There are folks who welcome the diversity. They love being exposed to new cultures and new traditions and new foods, and they think it's awesome. And there are those people who feel really threatened by it, who are uncomfortable, who, hear different languages being spoken or don't recognize things for sale in the supermarket, and it makes them uneasy. And so you've got a mix of people who are happy and people who are worried.
In many ways, it's a generational thing. I mean, that may be generalizing the whole thing, but I think it's people who were here and got used to this place being the way it was, and now, they go downtown and the old diner that they wanted to go to is now an Indian restaurant, or, So I think that the change, to me, it's striking how rapidly this change has taken place and how it continues to build. And as the older generation dies off or decides to move somewhere else, this place is going to be completely different. And I don't think we really know what the commonality, what the thinking is going to be amongst the people that are here.
Well, one of the changes, and we're talking about change, which is always difficult for people. One of the changes is that it's becoming a more urbanized setting, and people think that they're bought into the suburbs. When you spend $1 million for a home and it's a suburban tract home in Menlo Park, more than $1 million.
Yeah.
Or San Mateo, or pick any community, you expect something more than what you're getting. I've always thought that was behind the leaf blower controversy. It's like people were upset that guys were making that much noise. I spent this much money on my house, I should have peace and quiet. When the fact is, as Bob alluded to, both of us growing up here in this county, I mowed the lawn. Somebody else didn't do it. We didn't have gardeners.
Right.
So how much of it is a natural resistance to change that sort of shepherds in a new political reality?
Well, it's not just resistance to change, although that's definitely some of it, but it's a resistance to change which feels unfamiliar. The mixing of different cultures, ethnicities, and races and religions. To many people, that's scarier than just change in terms of increased urbanization or noise, right, or traffic. Those kinds of change are uncomfortable as things get more crowded and more noisy. But the idea that somehow they're losing their community, that they're being invaded or something like that, more that kind of clash of civilizations kind of idea, I think that sort of change for many people is even more threatening.
You mentioned off the air that you had a long discussion with your 7th grader about what language to study, and you advocated and apparently won the day on Spanish. Why was that?
Well, his older brother and I just started speaking in Spanish to him, which threw him off a little bit, and then, pointed out that, look, your best friend only speaks Spanish to his parents. Wouldn't it be nice if you could talk to your friend's parents? Think of all the people around that speak Spanish, all these people that you interact with. This is the reason to speak Spanish. There are people you'll be able to talk to that you're already interacting with, your friends' parents, the neighbors, the folks who come to the house. It's practical.
Well, that's why you wanted him to want to learn Spanish. Why did you want him to learn Spanish?
Well, to be honest, I think the more languages you speak makes you more marketable. Right? You're going to be able to attract higher wages. You're going to be more attractive to employers. So if you can put on your resume that you speak Spanish in an area where a significant portion of the population speaks Spanish, you're a more attractive employee.
I have a stepdaughter that speaks Chinese and speaks English, and I encouraged her when she was in junior college and then when she went to the university to learn Spanish. Mm-hmm. Because if you speak Spanish and Chinese and English, again, the marketability factor of it, you can go anywhere. You can write your own ticket to a great degree as we move forward in the world that we live in.
The changes are inevitable too, aren't they really? I mean, I think about, I've lived in the same home in Redwood City since 1980. And, some years ago, people started hiring gardeners to come. And I noticed the other day that the gardener now has a sign on the side of his truck for his business, and that he has 2 or 3 other people working for him. And clearly he has 2 or 3 other trucks that are out serving. So he started from a one-man operation to an enterprise. It's an entrepreneurial enterprise. And that's one of the things that being around here provides you with, especially if you're going to work in the service industry, it seems to me. So there's a certain inevitability about this, would you say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, you know, as I've worked with a number of Hispanic elected officials, and the
Including the first one since California became a state,
Ruben Morales. But it's the entrepreneurial spirit that exists in a lot of families is what gets lost with people. People think, oh, they come here, they just want to take the money, they want to do that. But in my experience, there's a great entrepreneurial spirit. There's a great wanting to build a business and do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take another break. I know it's a little early for Garrett back there in the control room, but we're going to take a break and go to the last segment. You stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Over there is Bob Marks and Melissa Michelson. And we've started what I think is going to be a continuing conversation here on the game for a while about San Mateo County, its identity, who it is, where it's going, what it should be, and how it can play a major role as a political factor in the region as regional issues become more and more critical, more and more important, and as we become a larger part of the region. The first question is, you know, we talked about communities that seem to have more in common with each other than they do with the big ends of the barbell, San Francisco and San Jose. What are those issues? What are the things that these communities have in common? Bob, let's start with you.
I was afraid you were going to call on me.
Traffic, housing costs?
Yeah, I mean, I think those things are absolutely true. You know, education has always been a high premium in this area, and I think that's escalated, if anything. You know, it's...
How much of it is maintaining what I've got? How much is that important to people?
I think that's a personal thing that a lot of people try to mask, but I think that's part of human nature. I think people want to retain what they have, and I think all people to some extent are territorial. Mm-hmm. And, you know.
So issues, as a political exercise, can issues unify people? Can the need for transportation because traffic is bad, the need for more housing because housing is so expensive, the need to make sure our schools keep up with what we expect them to be?
I think the challenge is that people would generally agree, yes, those are important problems. Traffic's a huge problem. Affordable housing is a huge problem. More difficult is getting people to agree on what's the best solution. Is the solution to the housing problem rent control? Is it requiring low-income housing units to be built when you get a building permit? Is it changing the zoning laws so that buildings can be higher density or taller? Right? What's the solution to the traffic problem? Do we build more lanes or do we try to get people out of their cars? So I don't think these are necessarily unifying solutions, but they're definitely agreed upon problems. Yeah. And so again, I think it's really hard to bring people together because they're going to have very different responses based on who they are personally, right? What's best for me is X, and what's next for my neighbor might be Y. We both think the same thing is a problem.
Well, how do you convince people who have housing that there's a housing problem?
Yeah,
right?
I don't think there is. I think one of the things that's changed is historically, people that lived here were going to San Francisco for their jobs. Now more and more people that live here are going to jobs here. And so that really changes the dynamic. I remember when I was first working in politics here, it was hard to get the attention of, you know, some major figures out there because their identity was with San Francisco and not here. Yeah. So I think there's new opportunities here in terms of the people that are working here and the power of some of these large companies that are really leaders in the world in their field.
Yeah, I want to get into that for a second. You know, I read an interesting set of statistics the other day that 177,000 people leave this county every day for work, and 174,000 come into the county for work. That's kind of crazy. It'd be nice if everybody just stayed where they were and worked there. But one of the things that's most interesting about that, and as you know, I work for Caltrain. We have a commute that's almost 50-50 in each direction. One of the few in the country that isn't everybody going to the main employment center in the morning and coming home in the evening. So one of the big differences is that there are major employers in this county. The history is that major employers got to a certain size and then they moved. They moved manufacturing somewhere else. They moved where land was cheaper, where housing was cheaper, where where employees were going to be cheaper. But they're staying here. Facebook is sort of the quintessential example, as is the biotech center in South San Francisco. Facebook doesn't have a product. Its product is ideas. And they need everybody in the same place, generating 1,000 of them a day in the off chance that one of them is a good one. So how is that? Is that a unifying force? Are they in a position, because they have common financial interests in the nature of this community, could that be a place where political leadership comes from? Or is that expecting too much from private employers?
I think it cuts both ways. I think there's a risk on the part of these big companies that the people will turn against them because they believe they are the ones that are causing the problems. I think the other side of it is what these companies bring into communities. Facebook, a community like East Palo Alto or Bellhaven, those communities have been underserved. Facebook is providing resources, even some housing and things that they would not be available to those communities. Mm-hmm. So it's how that all evolves. But I think there is a risk that people will turn against these companies and feel that they're making all the money and they're not contributing enough to what we need here.
As a political scientist, it just makes me a little uncomfortable to think that it would be the corporations driving things, providing housing, providing services. And what if Facebook decides, you know what, this isn't working for us anymore. We're going to relocate to Cupertino, right, or Nevada, right? If their motive is profit, not public support and winning elections, right? If what they're serving is stockholders and profit, I don't know that they're necessarily making the choices that are best for the county, even if in the short run it seems that they are helping the county.
Now, what's driving their public policy is that they can move to Nevada all they want to, but all the people they want to hire won't go there. And some of that is driven by an economy where if I can't get what I want at Facebook, I'll go somewhere else because there is somewhere else to go.
But they could move to Cupertino or Fremont, right? They could move out of the county, even if they wouldn't move out of California. Yeah. And so I think there's always a risk in terms of giving a corporation or an industry too much control over what's happening in public affairs.
What I can tell you is that it's having a notable effect on Redwood City. You work downtown at all, or you're there during the day, and you see hordes of young tech workers walking to lunch, filling up restaurants. On a Friday night, when you used to be able to shoot off a cannon without fear of hitting anybody in a downtown, now there are bars and restaurants that are packed clearly with people in their 20s and early 30s who are there. So that's another change. They may not live here, but they're spending time here, they're spending money here, and they work here. Let's go back to the original set of questions, because we only got a few minutes left. Who is San Mateo County? Who is it now? And what's the best answer for what you think it ought to be? I'm going to ask Bob to start there.
Yeah, who is it? You know, to me, it's what I said before, which is it's all of California in one county. In terms of, what was the other part of that question?
What should it be?
What should it be?
Who should it aspire to be?
You know, I think in many ways it is what it is. I think it should aspire to have a larger role in the region and to play a larger role in creating a vision of how we deal with it. So much of what we're dealing with now is a large kind of mega region where you can go up to Sacramento or San Joaquin Valley. It's that whole area in between. And we need to start looking at how do we get people from communities out, further out that have housing, how do we get them here to jobs in Silicon Valley? So As far as what we should be, I just think we need to try to find a way to play a stronger role.
Yeah. Melissa, who is San Mateo County?
We're young and diverse and thinking up new ideas and very innovative, very entrepreneurial. So it's a very dynamic and diverse county. Yeah. What we should be maybe is more careful about making things accessible and inclusive for those kind of at the outskirts of that community, the people who have lower incomes, who maybe are getting priced out of their housing or are getting their commutes more and more unpleasant, and are feeling marginalized. We need to make sure we're not just serving these young 20 and 30 somethings who are working at Facebook.
Yeah. Bob Marks, Melissa Michelson, thank you for being the maiden voyage on a tough conversation we're going to continue to have here on The Game. And I'm Mark Simon. Thanks for being with us. We're going to continue to have a conversation about San Mateo County, its vision, its role, its place in the larger community. But right now, that's all we have for today. Thanks for being with us, and join us next time on The Game.